Hey, and welcome back to yet another edition of Lessons with Legends, the Nectar Blueprints. Lessons with Legends, bringing you obviously some incredible information with regards to biohacking your world and your health, and just being able to optimize your game when it comes to health. And today we're going to specifically be talking about peptides and the world of peptides, which really gets me excited. And one specific peptide that has been transformational for the majority of people that submit themselves to the work of the peptide. So I'm going to walk you through quite a bit of information today. And if you're a doctor that's listening, phenomenal. You're going to learn a lot about peptides. If you're a patient or general public that is curious about peptides and how they can benefit you, you're going to learn something as well. And so the concept that I want to walk everyone through today is understanding what peptides are, how they are impactful, how they're definitely different than any pharmaceuticals that are out there, and the kind of ridiculousness that goes with the regulation of these peptides. And then we're going to talk about the peptide that I have most use with, and give some shout outs to people that got me going in this direction, and look at the future of what these peptides may bring for us, and some of the challenges that can be around. So, essentially, a peptide is a either short chain or long chain amino acid. What that means is basically a series of amino acids are built into um, uh, uh, a peptide. So amino acids go back a little bit just to break this down. Amino acids are the building blocks of life, and we use amino acids. If you're in health and fitness, you understand that amino acids are essential to building muscle. They're essential to building all sorts of different proteins throughout the body. They're absolutely intimately connected to hormones. If you will, like insulin is actually a peptide, and when you look at it, we look at insulin as a hormone, but it is a peptide. So it's a amino acid. So amino acids are definitely essential in your world. If you're not getting amino acids, you're not getting good dietary proteins that break down, or you're not taking an amino acid supplement, you can run into some serious challenges where the body starts to break down. And so, understanding that these peptides are just long chain or short chain amino acids, and then how they work. But before we go specifically into the one peptide I want to talk about today, which is semaglutide or semaglutide, as some people will call it, we have to lay a little bit of foundation of how we got here. And some semaglutide or semaglutide has been revolutionary with regards to weight loss. And I'm going to walk you through that mechanism. And I think everybody should either try it or utilize it. Everybody, literally everybody. So I'm going to support that fact with what we were going to talk about today. But we need to go back and understand the history of how we got here. Okay. How we got to, and where semaglutide basically came around was a discovery. Researchers trying to figure out solutions for diabetics and diabetics. So we have to understand how we got to diabetes, which is the number one preventable and changeable disease, type 2 diabetes, if you will. And the discovery of these peptides and how it has influenced in a way, but you can't get it in the normal realms that you need to get it. We're going to go through some of those shortcomings as well. Okay. So if we back up, I say this quite often, your best nutritional years were when you were breastfed. Hands down, perfect. Perfect proteins, fats, carbohydrates, ratios, immunoglobulins. I mean, you got everything from mom if you were breastfed. And if you were breastfed, those were the perfect months, maybe years of your life, where immediately after you started a cascade of processed foods. All right. So we go back from an infant getting beautiful, beautiful nutrition, and even the feedback mechanism. There was a study that I had read that they isolated the fact that the baby's saliva can have even an enzyme that goes through mom's breast that goes up to her brain, and their brain actually cascades the nutrients that the baby needs. So it'll actually give the baby what the baby is communicating. It's a brilliant system. I mean, obviously it would be because it was divinely created. And so this system would create exactly what an infant needs. This is where I go down. This is totally another topic where I go down like, do we really need vaccinations? Do we really need vitamin K? And the body is so much more brilliant than we ever will give it credit for. More brilliant than anything that we'll ever discover in chiropractic, alternative medicines, alternative natural therapies, and medicine in general. You're just not going to be able to beat it. You can mimic it, you can match it, which is what a lot of this peptide game is doing, but you will never, ever be able to beat it. It's beautiful. And I've said this from day one COVID came around. I said, nothing's going to beat natural immunity. So if you can weather this storm, if you can weather the COVID storm, you get COVID, we support your body with lots of electrolytes and rest and things like we do here at the Nectar, which is major autohemotherapy, ozone in the blood, keep the body oxygenated and nutrified. You'll be able to survive it, but allowing the immune system go. So back to mom and baby, this was a perfect scenario. But immediately thereafter, we run into the challenge that processed food. So, you look at Gerber, anything Gerber makes is processed foods, even Gerber organic, and then there's spinoffs of all these little organic things. The best foods that an infant can get is if you're making it at home. Otherwise, you are subjected to government regulations on food sources. I'll give you a great example. It wasn't too long ago that I'm going to fix one thing here in our, so I'm a little distracted for a second. Our video source, which gives me a segue into the fact that these podcasts are on YouTube, and just search the Nectar Blueprint, Lessons from Legends, and you will be able to find the video. So if you guys were not privy to last week's podcast with Susan Bratton, you want to go back and watch that podcast. You can listen to it for sure, but she even tells you in there like you're going to have to get the visuals. The visuals are well worth it. So anyways, the coming back full circle, I'll fix my little issue here. Coming back full circle. So the processed food game, it comes from regulations, and a great example of that was Pepsi's brand. Coca-Cola owns Gatorade. Pepsi owns what you call it? What is the Powerade? And Powerade for some time had a flame retardant that was in it. I could not believe it when I first heard this, so I always do my investigation. So I gathered my data on this. And I was like, it's actually in there. So this particular chemical that was in there. Well, why? Well, apparently Powerade had a possibility of catching on fire. So the government regulations said, hey, you got to put, so they put a flame, instead of changing their formula or making it healthier or trying to do something along those lines, they just put a flame retardant in it. And happy day, you got a flame retardant in your Powerade that you're drinking. So my kids were never allowed to have Powerade. They're like, Gatorade. I'm like, maybe in little bits of that. Let's water that down. But Powerade had all sorts of chemicals in it, so we stayed away from it. But this is the example of the regulations that get put on the food industry. Okay. And the food industry is not innocent in this at all. They are there to make stuff that tastes damn good, hits a dopamine receptor in your nervous system, so that you desire more. And I've talked about this in the past too. I got to interview Russell Blaylock. He's a medical doctor, phenomenal mind. He would not jump on a podcast, and bless his heart, he was like, I'm too old for that now. And I doubt it, but he was willing to answer some of my questions. And he wrote the book, Excitotoxins That Taste a Kill. I opened that book and it was like, read it cover to cover. I was like, holy man, we need to make some changes. So if you've not been exposed to excitotoxins, okay, then that needs to be there. But down this path of excitotoxins were known basically a stabilized salt form of a nerve agent that we know as Agent Orange that would kill people. We used it immensely through Vietnam and things like that. And I still work with people that are dealing with neuropathy from Agent Orange. But the concept is that they had to take this gas, Agent Orange gas, and come back and stabilize it. They had stockpiles of it during the war, and so they stabilized in a salt form as glutamate, basically. And glutamate, and many of you know glutamate is MSG. MSG is a flavor enhancer to that accord. How did they get there? Well, they just started doing studies with this to understand the implications on the nervous system, and started, and low dose give to rats. But they found out that you had a control rat group, right? And we give them food, the regular food, so just whatever processed little kibbles or something like that. And then you had one that had the additive of MSG in it. And they would find that the rats would eat all the MSG food, like they just press the little button and get more and more and more and more. Whereas the regular food, they didn't. So of course you can understand like what implications could that have if we put that in a cookie or we put it in a snack, and then we make our people that we sell our food sources to addicted to this. Yeah, well, that's conspiracy, but it's not. It's there. It's all documented. So your food industry is there to convert you into an addict, where you want more and more and more of this. So when I work with people that are running into weight loss challenges, trying to transform their body and getting really frustrated, I've tried this diet, I've done keto, I've 1 meal a day, I do all these things, and it doesn't work, doc. And I'm like, I get it, okay? Because you were born into this system of a food industry, and government regulations can control the food industry and only get you, a variety of minimal food sources. Okay, meaning nutrients that are very, very sparse. And it becomes a challenge because we deal with people every day that are nutrient deficient. And so we're actually trying to counteract that with IV nutrition and things like that. So this has long, deep roots, meaning that, before you even knew it, you were consuming processed foods that got you on this addiction chain. All right. So then fast forward many decades, and we have this epidemic, across our country, and it doesn't really exist in the forms that exist in other countries. It doesn't. I mean, other countries laugh at America. It's like, look at what you guys put in your foods, and then we're wondering why we have this epidemic of insulin resistance, and lending towards type 2 diabetes. All right, it's because of the addiction to sugars, predominantly sugars and processed foods. And so this whole pattern of you getting as an infant, so maybe a Gerber puff, little, crunchy snack that, the baby likes it. So the baby likes it. We're just going to buy more of this and feed the baby and keep the baby quiet. If the baby's hungry, we give them a little snack. We're out running around, give the baby a snack, and we just process food, process food, process food, process food. If you don't know, as a family raising kids, or your family, your mom and dad, and however you grew up, didn't know this process was going on, then you never challenged the nutrition value of the foods that you eat. You were subject to all of this processed food without question. And so what this processed food does is creates this cascade in your body of insulin resistance down the road. Okay. And so this takes many decades to start to develop. But when it hits, there is just this waterfall kind of effect, or snowball kind of effect, if you will, of the body going into disarray, and disease states start settling in. Okay. So how do we know this? Well, when we test, and it's kind of a funny concept, but there's a history in testing insulin resistance. There was different lab values that we'd look at over the years, and then it's eventually gotten to what we know to be true is A1C, which is your hemoglobin A1C. What that is just a measure of a 90-day sugar saturation in the bloodstream and the tissues. So that's what we know. It's a predictive factor for your blood sugar over a period of time. So what happens with these chemicals and processed foods is that your pancreas gets overloaded, and the pancreas gets overloaded because it's trying to produce enough insulin to pick up all the blood sugar. So processed foods break down. And I say this all the time, any carbohydrate is sugar, and every sugar is a carbohydrate. So carbs, when the body gets a carb, it's a sugar. And now most processed foods are carbohydrates. And so you are eating copious amounts of sugar. It's virtually impossible to get away from. If you've eaten fast food, it's predominantly all sugar. You're like, well, yeah, but I got a burger. Okay, so let me walk you through this. Well, I got a burger, and that burger was protein at least. I ate at McDonald's, and I got a Big Mac or quarter pounder or what have you. So you have this idea that you're getting a protein source. Well, predominantly you are, and we could talk about the quality of that protein source, but that protein source was fed corn, and corn is infiltrated in everything because it's a cheap source of feed for a lot of your protein sources. So this cow is now eating a ton of corn that's finished with corn and stuff like that. That corn is what? A carbohydrate. That carbohydrate is a sugar. So you're eating a protein source filled with sugar. Does this make sense? So you can't get away from it. Then you put sugar in ketchup and mustard to make it taste good. There's pickle that's carbohydrates. It's just sugar, and then maybe two pickles if they're generous. And then you got a bun that is predominantly sugar. It's carbohydrates, processed flour down into a tasty white bun. And then you got fries, which is sugar, cooked in oils. And you take McDonald's in general, they use a little bit of sugar in their mixture for salt and sugar to make it more what? Appealing. It tastes really good. Their fries, how many times I heard this? Their fries are incredible. Well, of course they are, because they're hitting the dopamine receptors in your brain, and your brain's like, hey, that's good. Give me more. Okay. So that is the concept of like processed food in general. If you're not getting your own lean game meats, which is I try to do. We've already harvested a elk this year, and I put in every which way I can to get that. We just missed a big bull this weekend. I spent 4 days out in the hills. We put over 20, I think 22, 24 miles in the backcountry. My 12-year-old did as well. She was phenomenal. She had some incredible um, shooting skills as well. We got her smacking iron out to 700 yards and dead center at 300 and 500. So we knew we could get it done. It just that things didn't work out. We're gonna try again, because that's how important it is to me. Once I understood the background, which I'm laying for you today, of understanding our food sources have been compromised. So if you buy into this concept that our foods have been compromised, meaning that they're more about pleasing the palate and getting you addicted to the food sources than they are about nutrition, even the organic realm, I've talked about this a lot, even the organic realm, if you play in that organic realm, well, the big food industry understood that. They're like, okay, people are onto this. Maybe it's not healthy. So they want organic. So we're going to create all these organic lines. And all the ones that were really good, meaning that they were independent, maybe, got bought by the big corporations. This is how the game is played. And so you may even be thinking that you're getting organic, but they've manipulated, just like they did in Washington, to manipulate all sorts of policies and regulations. They've manipulated the politics behind food sources and what can be considered organic. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down. I'm just exposing you to the concepts of what you have bought into and eaten over the last many decades. Okay, so the problem exists in the fact that you are consuming high amounts of carbohydrates, which creates an insulin spike, a blood sugar spike, and insulin spike. So insulin over time is there to pick this up. Now, I can go into cellular aspects of making sure that the cell membrane is flexible enough that you're getting good oils that makes that outer membrane adapt, meaning that there's certain receptors that we need to be able to change and adapt to its environment. So when insulin is there, that insulin can pick up blood sugar. There's a whole process that's going on around that. Doctors, if you have not, been exposed to this, this is where a lot of the seed oils become an issue. Versus, the unsaturated oils versus saturated oils. Saturated fats can be very damaging to the cell membrane, so that cell membrane cannot change. It cannot adapt to its environment. So then you have high blood sugar and you have high insulin. and those are not binding together. And because those are not binding together, the body adapts and says, well, crap, we're not doing what we need to do. Blood sugar's still high, so I'm going to crank out more insulin. And it's this positive feedback mechanism that over time, that the pancreas gets really, really tired. So it goes through bouts of like, oh, I'm cranking out insulin. So if you can imagine, working, and then your boss dumps like a whole, stack of paperwork and was like, hey, I need this done by the end of the day. You're like, well, I was already working at this pace. Now I got to work at this pace. What are you doing? You're calling home and just saying, look, I got to stay late tonight because this project, is taking more than what we thought. I got to put more hours into it. What do you feel like? Well, you feel disconnected. You're overwhelmed. You're overworked. You're going to break down. The immune system is going to be compromised because you're putting in later hours. You're maybe not sleeping as well. You're not eating as well. The body's the same way. It's like, okay, I got all this issue right now. I'm going to have to kick it in a high gear. So I need more energy to be able to do this. I need more more fuel to be able to do this. And if I'm not getting any fuel, the system breaks down. So there we go. We start ticking towards insulin resistance. All right. And then the pancreas up regulates and starts cranking out as much insulin as it can. So you get this concept: high blood sugar, high insulin. They're not binding and not connecting. So we're not taking that. So then your pump for sugar is literally muscle. So then you take a generation, if you will, or many generations that are more sedentary. They're not exercising. They're not building muscle on a regular basis, maybe not lifting heavy things. So your muscle becomes less and less. And that pump that helps with the blood sugar, meaning your muscle, is not big enough. It's not, efficient enough. And so then, well, what do? We become even more insulin resistant. And in the presence of insulin, there are now studies coming out that specifically talk about the fact that in the presence of insulin, the body will not shed fat. And this is hands down how the body works. If there is sugar present, it will go after sugar first for fuel. So if we have high blood sugar, high saturated muscle tissue with sugar, the body's saturated, your A1C, again, saturation, 90-day saturation, the body is going to do what with that fuel? It's predominantly going to use that fuel. If it's prevalent, it will always use sugar. This is what we call anaerobic glycolysis. So it is the breakdown of sugar for fuel sources. If you're constantly in that regime, now add sodas to the mix, cakes, candies, pure sugar. I watched a little clip. A guy was actually using it as an example and went to Dunkin' Donuts and their blended pumpkin latte of some sort. So you got some caffeine in there, and blended was the equivalent of like it was 62 teaspoons of sugar. So in their large pumpkin. So Starbucks is no different. Okay. Those of you who love Starbucks, that is sugar. So you're just consuming high amounts of sugar all the time. If you're not watching, if you're not calculating, if you're not looking at the back of ingredients and stuff like that, and that gets a little tricky as well, because you're like, oh, this has only got 28 grams. And it was like 28 grams of sugar is a lot. Vitamin water is a great example. One of my kiddos loves vitamin water. I'm like, okay, but let's look at the back of it. Well, then a lot of you go, well, let's go sugar-free, which is more of a chemical load. So not good. It's not a good alternative. Energy drinks are now just catching on to this, and they're saying, oh, we're going to help this game. We're going to make sugar-free stuff. You're like, yeah, I've got sugar-free. Okay, so you look at the back of it, it says, hey, 28 grams of sugar. You're like, yeah, okay, I can probably deal with that. But then the serving size, and multiple times you'll see that there's like how many servings per package, per can, per whatever. And it could be 2 or 3 or 4 different servings. So then you just 2x, 3x, or 4x that sugar amounts. The sugar is predominantly overwhelming in all of our food sources. I think you get the point. Okay. So the body is overloaded with sugar, and it's going to use and become more efficient at that glycolysis and then never go to fat. Now, here's the thing. The body will use sugar or fat for fuel. All right. Protein, to a lesser extent, has to go down a pathway to be able to break that down, build it, and use some energy. The proteins are usually our recovery, repair, all those types of stuff, but it can use it for energy, but predominantly sugar or fat. Okay. So if you're burning sugar, what are you not burning? We're not burning fat. And so literally back, and I wish I would have brought it in today. It might be sitting on my shelf. I'm not going to go run and get it. But my physiology textbook in my undergraduate, I graduated in 1998 with a degree in kinesiology. Our physiology textbook had a maximum like testing for body fat composition at 28%. And so 28% was like, whoa, if you're like above 28%, you're considered morbidly obese. And there was no charts to go past that. So it was like women, if you're 28 and under, then you fit the charts. So at the time, we would test, we do hydrostatic weighing, which is like where you blow all the air out, you get dunked in a pool, you get weighed in a pool, then there's calculations, and it was still like a gold standard to test your body composition, your fat compared to your muscle. There's now advancements in that. We use something called bioelectrical impedance analysis, which is phenomenal. There's some cheaper versions. You've probably even been exposed to one where they got little metal things. You hold it and you get there's some variance in that. It has to do with your water, your electrolyte balances, how much water you're getting. But there are more advanced levels of that, which we have where we set leads up to the body and we get actually an algorithm. It's called impedance. But impedance is a breakdown of reactance and resistance in the body. So we put electrical pulse through the body and we get reactance and resistance. And that algorithm, kind of NASA-based technology, gives us your body composition, okay? So again, coming back to the full circle, then 1998, so what are we at? 25 years ago. That was hard math. 25 years ago, 28 was the upper end of the scale that if you were over 28%, that's like, oh gosh, you're morbidly obese. Well, as good science goes, we just start moving that number because we don't want people to think they're fat, right? So we just start moving that number. I am seeing people over 50% fat now, almost double, if you actually consider, almost double what I learned 25 years ago in my undergraduate education that even existed. So we have a problem. Yes, the body is laying down more fat. That is the byproduct of sugar. So the storage form of excess calories is fat. Predominantly sugar will convert to fat. So we're laying down fat. Now, how bad is this? Well, this never existed 25 years ago in any of the literature, which is what we call visceral fat. And so visceral fat, visceral meaning organ, deep organs, we're seeing fatty livers and fatty hearts and fatty pancreases and fatty everything. The body's laying down fat where it can lay down fat, where it normally, again, 25 years ago didn't exist. So you see this pattern. You see the problem. Can you connect to this problem? So we're laying down more fat in areas that we never laid down fat before, that the body is just so over fat because of the excessive calories, the insulin resistance, the inability to pick up sugar, the conversion to fat. People are fatter and fatter than they've ever been. Okay. Me included. All right. I'm not exempt from some of these processed foods. I have times. All right. On our hunt, we were eating our only food sources. We try to bring some stuff, make some clean sandwiches and up in the hills and things like that. But we get back at 9:30 from hiking down into the hills, and it's we try to go good. Like Peak is a dehydrated food. I've a gastronome. Again, shout outs to these people. If you're a hunter and you love these dehydrated foods or you're storing food, those are great. But they have a lot of calories, and a lot of those calories are going to come from carbohydrates. So we can't get away from that. Now, granted, I'm burning those. So our last yesterday, we came out of the hills. We actually tracked a bull, and we were trying to get on him. And the amount of calories that we consume, having a heart rate up and hiking literally verticals of climbing up to 1,000 feet vertical and doing 6 to 7 miles in just a morning. Yeah, you're burning those calories. So there's an exchange there. So I'm willing to do that, but we're consuming that. So I'm not immune to this as well. Okay, and that's my point. And then the little things of infiltrate in my environment too. Okay, and then there is an addiction to sugar, so you got to watch that as part of your regime. But bottom line, so we start the process of ticking towards insulin resistance because of the processed foods. I think you're getting this concept and just laying this foundation down. All right, so the insulin resistance starts ticking up. Now, I love this because we just start changing the rules. All right. Good science just changes the rules to be able to fit and be able to what? Continue to sell. This is like the vaccine and a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down, but let's change the rules. Okay. And let's tell everybody this is necessary. And this will give you lifelong immunity. This will actually keep you from transmitting COVID. This will actually take you down the path of getting immunity, and it'll be safe. Well, that first shot didn't work. So now we're just going to mention the fact that you're going to need a booster. And that booster didn't work, even though it was now being government mandated. And you need a third shot, and then maybe a fourth shot. Okay. I love the concept. If you didn't see this, Aaron Rodgers, he's injured his Achilles, and Keith Olbermann hit him on this about like it's because he didn't get his vaccinations. And Aaron, I don't know if you guys know this, but Aaron Rodgers' dad's a chiropractor. So I'm assuming he grew up without vaccinations just because it is very prevalent in our profession. We understand natural immunity. So he's got a different look on it. And he says, yeah, Keith, go get your fifth shot, man. That was his response. Beautiful. It was just put brilliantly. Like, don't attack me on this, but he probably grew up in a somewhat healthier environment, understanding the body's immunity, understanding health comes from the inside out. Health is directly related to the foods that we eat. So a very fine-tuned athlete that was told that he would never become anything. And arguably one of the better quarterbacks that are out there. Unfortunately, he's done because he tore his Achilles. So that's probably just repetitive trauma to that as well. But if you look down like Tom Brady, since we're on the sports, I mean, you look at his dietary habits to keep him going at the age that he was going, absolutely phenomenal. Okay. But not a lot of us can afford, a private chef that, keys all this stuff up and makes this happen for us. So you got to do the work yourself, and being the point. Okay. So again, we understand how the science can be manipulated to be able to fit the criteria for selling you something. Okay. And this happens in the food sources as well. So I'm seeing this in biomarkers, blood biomarkers that we would test. And even in the last 2 years, the level for being considered insulin resistance has gone from 5, just the number 5, that's your A1C, hemoglobin A1C, has now gone up as high as I've seen it in LabCorp as 5.8. So what's the difference? Why are we not considered diabetic at 5 anymore? Okay, type 2 diabetes is one of the main criteria, elevated blood sugar. So we got to see blood sugar. There's a couple other components to it, but the A1C is a predominant marker. And even pharmaceutical companies will say, hey, you have to be at this level in order for you to be considered diabetic. And the insurance says, well, we're not going to cover you in this realm. We're not going to pay for medicines and therapies related to diabetes unless you hit this mark. Okay, well, it used to be 5. And now I'm seeing trends of 5.8. So if you're under 5.8, you're okay. What's the difference? Why, a couple years ago was 5 considered the source, meaning you got to keep your A1C below 5, which is, again, your insulin resistance. Now it's 5.8. Well, the insurance companies are going to say, well, if that population that they're covering from an insurance standpoint, if that population is getting fatter and fatter and sicker, more people are hitting that 5 mark. Okay. If the more people are hitting that 5 mark, what do they have to do? Well, they have to pay more money out. So they're now having to pay for more of the diabetes related conditions. So why not just move the number? So if we move the number, that probably takes millions of people out of this diabetic realm. All right. And now they don't fit the criteria. So they don't get the medicines. They don't do this. And this is my biggest peeve, if you will, with science, that it's just bad science. Okay. How can it in 2 years, nothing changed? It's not like we got new data. It's not like we understand the physiology differently. We just moved it. Okay. And nobody even talks about it. I literally never heard even the biohackers talk about this. So here I am on the forefront of just seeing this going and just raising a flag. All right. This is bullshit. All right. It's absolute bullshit. So then you go down the path of like, okay, this is big corporation. This is big money, not a conspiracy. They are moving the mark to not have to cover as many people. This is an epidemic. We all are getting to more insulin resistance, which is causing us to slide towards the path of type 2 diabetes. But we just move the numbers so not as many people are type 2 diabetics. Absolutely incredible how that works. All right. So I'm just going to stick with 5 because it was something that made some sense at the time. And then you can look at a population of very healthy people that stress their body in resistance, meaning they submit themselves to the work of actually lifting heavy weights, building some muscle. Got to get some good muscle. Okay. Got to get some good muscle, and they're pumping sugar better. They watch what they eat. They're going to be under 5. So that's the whole goal. We want to see people under 5. All right. I'm not going to buy into this 5.8. So when people come in and they're like, hey, my doctor says my A1Cs, I'm like, is okay. Excuse me. Good oxygen intake over the last 4 days. Breathing hard. All right. I was up in the hills, so I got a little bit of dust and a little bit of that. But so I'm not going to buy into this 5.8 realm. So when people say, well, I've done blood work, my primary care physician has done the blood work and I'm not diabetic. I'm like, can I see it? They're like, well, sure. I pull it up on my phone. I'm like, okay, here's the numbers that I play with. And here's the numbers that the rest of the world's playing with. So if you want to play in my world and we're actually moving towards health and optimizing your body, we're going to play under 5. You can go ahead and submit yourself to insurance and play the game that they want to play with the pharmaceutical companies and wait until you're 5.8 before they'll actually diagnose you. And who knows, by the time you're at 5.8, it'll probably change to 6.2 or 6.4. And then the insurance companies will sponsor scientists to be able to do studies and show new things and manipulate all that data. All right. So you never get the coverage. You never get the care. You never get what you need to actually reverse a condition. And then once you're there, we'll just keep you there. Okay. We'll keep you sick because there's money in keeping you sick. There's money in keeping you in that. All right. So that's the patterns. All right. So I play with the 5.8. Okay. Play with the 5.8 or play with the 5. It's up to you. As far as me and the patients that we take care of and the people that we lead, we're going to play under 5. So the goal is under 5. And I give a lot of credit to Dr. Graham Simpson. He's a natural medical doctor that turned me on to this peptide. Okay. And he turned me on to this peptide from the standpoint of being able to talk about his program that was Live Below 5. That was his whole goal, is to help people. And he's written multiple books on this. He was able to grace us for a couple years, about a year and a half, oversight in our office. And I appreciated him for this, but he was busy. He was traveling to Dubai. He was setting up clinics there and really getting this thing off the ground to be able to help people live below 5. That was the whole concept, because of the damaging effects when you get over 5 and that insulin resistance and what it causes in the body. Okay, as far as disease states and chronic conditions and all those types of things. So this is the data that we're going to play off of, which is as 5. If you're above that, you're ticking towards insulin resistance. Okay, which causes all sorts of chronic conditions and disease states and all those types of things. But it comes back from this long history of being exposed to processed foods. That's it. So you can totally reverse this number. You can totally reverse this number with some specific clean eating. And a lot of people have done that. Okay. However, that blood sugar system and insulin system, unless insulin gets to rest, unless that pancreas gets to rest, you are going to be stuck in this cycle. All right. And this cycle will perpetuate and get worse. Okay. So it's not like oh, I'm here and I'm going to stay here based on what I eat. It's going to continue to get worse because the more fat that you lay down, and fat becomes an interference in the body, literally releases interferons. Okay. That disrupts all the hormonal processes. And then as you age, hormones start to decrease. And it is people are laying down pounds of fat every year. And that compounds. Right? It compounds unless you fix this blood sugar system. Okay. So if you go down the pattern that you're exposed, okay, and you may have even been getting data from your primary care physician that was wrong, like, well, you're at 5.5, so you're okay. You're at 5.6, you're okay. A year ago you weren't, but now you're okay. We're just going to say you're okay. Your blood sugar is good. Don't worry about it. So we won't treat to move somebody towards health, but we'll run diagnostics until you get really sick. All right. And then when you're really sick, you got to pay more out of pocket and all those types of things as well. Okay. So you got to meet deductibles. And so there is an element of like once you're really sick, then you're contributing to and paying everybody else's premiums and stuff like that by, you know, not everybody else's premiums, but you're feeding that machine, if you will, by having to come out of pocket for all your healthcare expenses. So there is a threshold. Excuse me. Guarantee the insurance companies are not going to lose this game. They can't. They just sit and look at data, and they're going to tweak that data to it fits so they can make those shareholders happy, which is they get to a point of like, hey, we've got enough money and we meet these quarterly earnings goals, and it's not about health. It's all about quarterly earnings. So we go down this path, okay, that you're ticking towards insulin resistance, and then you hit a mark, they change the mark, and you're not considered diabetic until it's fully blown and just blown out of proportion. Okay, so we get this concept: processed foods causing insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a marker that they keep changing. So you may not even know that you have a problem from your primary care. Now we're playing again over here. I'm going to say, hey, look, I want you under 5 because your body operates a lot better that way. And we're going to help you make changes to go that direction to be able to get your body less insulin resistance. So if we can actually change that insulin resistance, make the system more sensitive, then it's a cascade the other direction. Okay, we're building a little bit more muscle. We have less of that blood sugar saturation. We're starting to break down fat. The more fat we break down, the leaner the body is, the healthier the body is, and we know all these things to be true. Okay, so that fat to muscle ratio, we start to tweak a little bit: more muscle, less fat; more muscle, less fat. More muscle means we can plump sugar, so we can get away with a little bit more. All right, that is the whole goal. All right, now full circle, this is where the peptide starts to come into play. So let me ask you this, and I want you to just resonate on this, kind of marinate this in your head for a little bit. If there was a supplement that could stabilize blood sugar and shut down, so to speak, in a way, your use of that blood sugar, where your body would target after fat, would you use it? Well, as long as I've been alive, and I go back way back when to there was Crown Valley. My parents bought into that. I remember Crown Valley. I remember the cans of like food was kind of dehydrated. I don't remember all of it. I was a little kid at the time, but we had these canisters of Crown Valley. Okay, so the Crown Valley was there, and then Herbalife came around, and there was all these multi-level, eat well and then make money while you're eating kind of concept. All right, so as long as I've been alive, there's been supplements and or dietary attempts, right, to change this game for people. So as long as I've been alive, people have been trying to figure out ways to be lean, healthy, clean, beautiful looking, six-pack carrying, muscular bodies. Okay, we know that that's healthy. We have an image of that as being healthy. I think it's a little warped with social media. You don't have to be rocking a six-pack and big, biceps and bikini bodies to be healthy. Okay. But there's an element of a leaner body being a healthier body. We just know that to be true because systems work better. Blood values show up better. There's less risks of heart disease and chronic issues and all these types of things. Okay. So we grasp that concept. But if there was a supplement that you could take that would do this, would you do it? Most people are like, well, yeah. Okay. That's what I want you to think as peptides are. Okay. Peptides are far from any pharmaceutical. Even though they're synthetically made, their impact is mimicking the natural peptides that exist in our body. Remember when I just said that insulin is a peptide? That is the concept. Insulin is a peptide. So what we're doing with these peptides, and come back full circle to semaglutide, it is a peptide that basically slows down our secondary blood sugar supplies. Okay. So again, if this is a supplement, would you take it? Yes or no? All right. This is where I want you to look. So for me, when I started researching this, and again, full credit to Graham Simpson, he's like, Todd, there is this peptide that I've been working with. I've worked with maybe a couple hundred people, and it's having phenomenal results. It is changing this body composition and fixing the blood sugar issue, the insulin binding with blood sugar issue, quicker than I've ever seen anything. And he's written books on it. I said, cool, I'll try it. I want to try it. I said, should I be on it, Graham? And he goes, yes. I'm on it. He's like, I've seen results. My body's leaning up. Like, cool. I want to lean up a little bit. Maybe I could lose some belly fat because over years that's crept up on me. I've worked out really hard. I eat clean, but I've seen a little bit of issues with that. And again, maybe it was because of decades earlier. Even though my mom was a beautiful soul and she really tried to make clean eating in our household, and times get tough, right? And so financially, it's hard to buy organics. It's hard to afford some of these types of things. So I know we went into bouts, and then of course my brother and I would be out, in the hills doing some stuff, and we'd stop by and get fast food. I was not immune to it. So maybe this started at a young age for me. Like I'm teaching you, I guarantee it did actually. And so I said, sure, I want to subject myself. I'm a hacker in my own health. I want to utilize things that really can make a difference. And so I jumped on the semaglutide and I was like blown away at what it did. I was like, dude, this is fixing some deeper rooted issues. Now, I run blood work twice a year. I keep track of some things. I watch some things, and I had a little tick up. I was like at 5 or 5.1. I can't remember. I was right there, and I'm like, in the realms of everything else, I would be considered healthy. All right, no issues, no diabetic issues, no problems with that. Okay, but here's the deal. I wasn't happy with that. I was like, why am I? And so I talked to my naturopath and he goes, there's a little age related stuff. I'm like, I'm still not happy with it. I want to make a change. So I jump on this peptide and it laid me out. I mean, I literally was fighting around the realms of 15, 16% body fat, which I wasn't happy with as far as how I worked out and what I did. Jump on the peptide, get down under like 11.6, under 12% body fat. I was like, that's awesome. All right. And I saw a significant amount of weight loss while maintaining muscle. Okay. And this is the key. A lot of you have heard maybe this peptide, you lose a ton of muscle and it's not healthy. Well, yeah, you're going to lose muscle if you don't move and don't lift and do all these types of things. So you can't just randomly say that. There's some well known doctors out there that are negative on the peptide, talking about the fact that you're going to lose muscle and it's not healthy. Okay. The point being, is that if you are exercising on a regular basis, lifting some heavy weights, you'll totally do fine with this, like I did. And so I was like, this is incredible how this is working. So what it does is literally, so we have a primary and secondary blood sugar system. Primary is basically, and this is my terminology for it, just to help you understand. My terminology is, a primary is when you eat, we get a rise of blood sugar. You have a bite to eat in the morning, whatever that may be, maybe even if you fast, you have a bite to eat for lunch, your blood sugar is going to rise. Insulin's going to kick out and pick it up. Okay. Once that crashes, your body's going to go after the most usable fuel source, which is more sugar to keep the energy going. All right. So your liver and your muscle tissue will break down glycogen stores, which is a storage. Glycogen is a storage form of sugar. Glucose goes into glycogen as a storage form, and then eventually can convert to fat if we have too much of it. But what happens is that this peptide works in that arena to slow that secondary blood sugar supply down. Okay. Naturally occurring peptide that exists already. All right. It's an on and off switch. And that on and off switch basically says, look, we have some needs on this. So it turns it on. You break down glycogen and then you get more blood sugar. Okay. To operate throughout your day. You see how you can be stuck in that system. All right. What the peptide does is the off switch and saying, look, we're not going to break down glycogen stores. So in all reality, does that help preserve muscle? If you're working out, yes, it does, because your muscle needs sugar demands immediately for the first 10, 15 minutes of working out. Okay. Anaerobic glycolysis, it needs that. So we're preserving the muscle tissue by making sure those are in there. If you guys work out a lot and you're in that industry, our industry in that realm, you've probably heard the fact that you need to eat 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, so you don't lose muscle tissue. That has to do with glycogen. Okay, so your glycogen stores are then going to be preserved. What immediately happens when we're shutting down that secondary blood sugar supply is that we get a lower, around 80, but stable blood sugar. So then body's like, okay, we have very little blood sugar. Insulin does not need to be released. Again, remember in the concept of insulin, in the presence of insulin, it's hard to lose fat. So insulin then gets to rest. Your pancreas gets healthier. Makes me wonder if this is the uptick of pancreatic cancer as well. It has to be. All right. And again, I'm sure we could probably pull studies and figure this out. But here's the concept. The pancreas gets to rest a little bit more because it's not having to crank out as much insulin. And then your body does what for fuel? Do you remember? It goes right after fat. So it says, look, we don't have blood sugar. We're going to go after fat. So we're going to break down, and your body can break down fat and use ketones for energy. And in fact, 9 calories per gram of fat versus 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates, you're getting almost well over double the yield of energy by using fat. Okay. So this is a ketogenic type of concept, a ketosis that the body's going to get into. Well, then you're breaking down fat. Bottom line, fast forward, when we're using this peptide now with people, we're seeing that body composition changing, transforming, body fat going down, muscle being preserved. We're seeing some incredible results with all of this. Okay. And so what happens then is the body starts shedding fat. We lose inches, we lose the belly fat, and we're taking the fat around organs and liquefying that first to get rid of that. So no more fatty livers. And this is all my case study, but this is all that we're seeing with this peptide is predominantly positive. So again, I ask you if there was a supplement that would help you to do this, something that's more natural, that would you take, would you do it? Okay. I'm thinking that majority of people would say yes. You're like, oh, where's the trick? Well, the trick is the fact that we're actually flooding that peptide. So it's a naturally occurring peptide. We're causing a reaction in our body. All right. Just like insulin is a peptide and causes a reaction in our body, we're just utilizing this to cause this reaction and fix the blood sugar system. The insulin blood sugar system gets fixed. All right. Now, I can tell you that we've had well over 2,500 people on this peptide now that we've worked. All right. And the majority have seen like 98%. Everybody's gotten results. There are some particular side effects that go with it, but it's usually self-induced. All right. Not necessarily related to the peptide, but a byproduct of fat metabolism and breaking down that aspect. Okay. Where people can get a little nausea or some stomach discomfort because they get disinterested in food. Their cravings go away. But we're fixing all of these issues with this peptide. Okay. And so I'm really excited what peptides will do because there's a bunch of different peptides out there. All right. There's peptides that now are being utilized to help growth hormones. As we age, we lose growth hormone, and that helps the gland actually produce more growth hormone. So we're seeing muscle preservation and actual muscle growth with that. So there's a whole nother podcast that I'm going to do on different peptides, but specifically, we're going to actually focus on the semaglutide here and walk you all the way through this. So stabilizing your blood sugar system, okay, and fixing that insulin resistance is hands down one of the healthiest things that you can do. I don't care how fit you are, how healthy you are, this has to be looked at because it's infiltrated. You may have had it when you were a little kid, going back to the best years of your life, where when you're breastfed, you may have had these issues when you started as a little kid. You got the Gerber puffs and you started processed foods. Okay, because, oh, it's kind of cool. Little Johnny likes his little puffs. We're going to get him the puffs. It's his favorite little food. All right. But this is the concept of now you got decades later and you're like, look, and I hear this all the time. Doc, I'm eating really clean. Show me what you're eating. Yeah, you're eating pretty clean. Okay. And I'm exercising. What's your exercise? Well, I'm hitting a HIIT workout 45 minutes a day and my body is not changing. In fact, it's getting worse. Okay. Then we have a blood sugar insulin issue. We have a blood sugar insulin problem. And that's what we're dealing with. Okay. So this peptide again fixes that problem. It literally transforms this. Now, what I didn't expect when we got these people on that, well, I didn't expect the magnitude of results. Right now, we're averaging about 35 pounds of weight loss in 90 days. But we're also starting to see some other systems be fixed. I have people that are literally on the peptide now, not because they need to lose weight, because they're autoimmune, rare autoimmune diseases that nobody's been able to help them cure is literally gone. And when they're on the peptide, and we're talking about microdosing with this as well now, too, once people hit goal weights, we're just microdosing maintenance values of it and things like that. But we're seeing these people have like reporting this stuff. They're just like, oh my gosh, doc, when I'm on the peptide, my rare autoimmune condition is not flaring. I'm like, well, that's because it's sugar. It's sugar related. You were saturated with sugar, and sugar actually causes sugar. It's not all bad, but it's causing a lot of these issues to start to pop up. Okay, so when we were fixing these types of things, not to mention we're seeing blood biomarkers like cholesterol change. Well, there's an intimate connection to insulin. High levels of insulin actually drawing up cholesterol. So cholesterol and blood pressure issues. So now we're seeing cardiovascular benefits by people on the peptide. Okay, so the peptide is actually fixing some cardiovascular risk factors. We're seeing cholesterol and blood pressure now come into normal realms in 90 days. So again, if there was a supplement that you could take that would do this, an all natural supplement, would you jump on it? Yes, and majority of people would. Okay, So if I could tell you in 90 days you can transform your risk factors for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, would you do it? All right. And the only potential risk of this, all right, is maybe a little nausea, which happens about 2 to 3%. But that's usually because people get disinterested in food and they're not eating, so they get a low blood sugar, okay, or some stomach discomfort. Now, there's only just a small group in studies that can't do this, shouldn't be on the peptide, and that has to do with chemo medications. All right, so that's a whole different scenario, or an active ulcer or gallbladder disease. Okay, that can be flared up because you're slowing digestion down. Those things can actually have some issues. Okay, and I can talk about that mechanism. You message me directly, but I want you to understand the concept of this peptide and the power of it. Okay. Now we play in compound pharmacy. So I say, look, you cannot get the peptide through your insurance company unless you're a full blown diabetic. And even that is really hard to get and is very expensive. So we play in compound pharmacy where we can actually get it and prescribe it for anybody. I don't have to wait till you're full blown diabetic to start working on your insulin resistance. All right. Now, there's all sorts of documented studies that are coming out now that it says like this should be used in different arenas for kids now that are, well, of course. I mean, during COVID, we had it take over like 60, I want to say 64% of our youth population is obese, and depends on their age range. There's different, but in general, we're well over 60% obesity rate. And with our kids, should this be used? Yes, if you could fix that blood sugar system prior to the later decades in life where it becomes a lot harder, would you do it? Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, as we're executing all these things, the New England Journal of Medicine is just starting to hammer like, hey, this should probably be used for this. This should be probably used for this. But in compound pharmacy, we get to play with dosing. So if we have a better effect or we can get the results that we desire with less of the peptide, that's good. And so we stay there. Some people need a little bit more, so we can go up there. So we don't have a fixed pin where it's just one injection and you get this one size fits all. Health never works that way. And so we get to manipulate the peptide and be able to do different arenas and play in that realm as well. Okay. So I want to expose you. We're hitting about an hour for today's podcast, but I really wanted to expose you to this phenomenal peptide that if you have not jumped on it, that you need to explore it and hack for your own health. If you could lean yourself up, all right, preserve muscle tissue and get rid of visceral fat because of this processed food game, would you do it? And we're seeing, like I said, well over 2,500 people come back into the office after 90 days. And they're just like, boom, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, 90 days, 41 pounds. She's like, I'm absolutely stoked on this. I feel good. I was like, yeah, how's your pain? Pain's gone. Yeah, because every pound extra that we carry is 6x on a joint. Happy day. So we're seeing all sorts of things transform. Okay. We've seen a gentleman about 42 pounds in 90 days. Cholesterol went from like, oh God, kind of levels. All right. We're talking about like 280s, come down to under 200. We've seen his insulin resistance being upwards of 6.8, come down to 5 flat. This is good. Blood pressure come down where he had to half dose his blood pressure medication. Doctor literally was like, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. All right. Until ultimately he's off his statins for the cholesterol, he's off his blood pressure medications, and just loving life. Okay. That's semaglutide, semaglutide. If you haven't looked at it, you need to. This is transformational. All right. A 10-year track record with this peptide and phenomenal results. All right. So that's my breakdown for you in about an hour of one of the most powerful peptides that I've ever had the pleasure of working with, experiencing in my own world. All right. And understanding peptides and the excitement for me to see that these things should be considered more supplements. And there's another pattern that's starting to develop that I think it will. There's another version of this that's starting to develop in science. I love how the fringes is actually driving this. It's going to cut big pharma out. Now, will it? I don't know. There's probably going to be some regulations. There already is FDA starting to regulate this type of stuff as well. But this thing's got a 10-year track record with safety record that you just can't shake a stick at. I mean, there's no known issues with this. You may throw out there pancreatic cancer. There was a twinge on that. Absolutely not. You look at the study; it was one rat, one rat that developed pancreatic cancer in all the studies that we've done. It just doesn't hold true. It does not hold true. One of the safest and most effective ways to biohack your world. Get yourself lean and carry your leanness into the later decades of your life, reducing your cardiovascular risk factors, or risk factors for diabetes. I literally have told people, go get checked now for your life insurance. You're probably paying a higher premium based on where you were compared to where, yeah, but I'm older. Yeah, but watch this. When your blood biomarkers are now within normal limits, you're considered premium. You're considered actually a higher level. You're less of a risk. You're less of a risk in life insurance. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay. As always, bringing you some lessons from legends. I learned from one, and I share that data with you. But we've got a 2,500 person case study to back this up and show you the results and understand it the way we do. For the Nectar Blueprint, I'm Dr. Todd. Signing off. We'll talk to you next week.